Welcome everybody today to today's spotlight. I can tell you that if you're here, it's because you're ready to take your real estate business to the next level. And I promise you that you're in the right place today. Now, we have an extraordinary story to share with you, one that will inspire you, one that will challenge you, and one that's really going to just show you all what's possible. I want to introduce to you guys Sawyer Stanley, someone who I'm proud to call both a friend and a business partner. Sawyer is a real estate agent who has achieved something insane in his first full year in real estate. Now, let me just set the stage and picture this. Sawyer transitioning from part-time to full-time real estate all in the middle of the year while balancing the responsibilities of another full-time job, having 3 young children, one of which just born a few months ago, taking a multiple week trip to Spain, and still managing to generate over 200K in net income. And that 200K, yes, it's after team and brokerage splits. That's money to Sawyer's pocket. But I think a lot of you guys are attracted to the story because Sawyer's story isn't only about the income, right? And don't get me wrong, the income is amazing, but it's also about the transformation. It's about the freedom. It's about the risk, leaving behind the safety net of the full-time 6-figure job and making the bold commitment to build a life and a career on Sawyer's own terms. It's about leveraging opportunities like the investment partner program to create consistent success and also carve out a future of financial freedom. If you're like most real estate agents, you know the challenges that we're in this market. Like it's undeniable, right? It's competitive, inventory is tight, and making the leap from part-time to full-time can probably feel like the most overwhelming thing that you've ever done. But what if you had a roadmap? What if you had someone who's already been where you are now, showing you how to build a business that not only survives this market, but also thrives? And that's what Sawyer's here to share with you today. And we're going to be diving in deep into the strategies that he uses to break through on how the investment partner program played a pivotal role in his success, and also the mindset shift that allowed him to exceed his own expectations. Now, Sawyer, kicking it over to you, man. I had when I was thinking about what questions I want to ask you today, I had so many different ways that I wanted to take this. And there's so many, I think, big things that so many people, whether they're new or experienced, are trying to accomplish in their business. But I think the one that's the most intimidating for everybody is this transformation to a full-time real estate job, to a transformation to a full-time commission position. So what kind of inspired you to transition from working full-time as a general contractor to now working full-time in real estate?
I think I like the opportunity to be paid based on performance. I was working for a few years as a project manager for a nonprofit, salaried position. So when I showed up to work, whether I was energized and doing great or not feeling that great and kind of doing a bad job, I was getting paid the same amount of money. And that doesn't really inspire me to wake up and get going. And so with real estate, it's you have to wake up. You've got to perform if you want to eat, feed your family. And so I enjoy that. It gives me a reason to wake up. It gives me a reason to try to improve myself and to learn and to push myself, which I think with progress, it makes me feel alive. And that's how I feel better at the end of the day, is when I make some progress.
That's amazing. Any idea what created that competitive burn, that competitive fire inside of you?
Oh, it's been a lifelong thing. I've always been super competitive. I've always liked the opportunity. I always like to work. So nothing crazy, other than I think with each child I've had, it kind of amplified, getting married, having kids. You have people that are counting on you to support them and to improve their quality of life. And so that's a huge driving force for motivation for me, is just trying to improve my family's life and make sure that we can live comfortably and do fun things. And so that's probably the biggest piece of motivation.
That's awesome. That's super huge clarity on what's most important to you and why you're doing everything. The big why right there. That's amazing. And so for the majority of the year, you were still working full-time as a contractor, and are you even still? But how did you balance that time, right? Because you were literally full-time. So what did your schedule look like? How did you balance the two things? Help us get some insight, because I know that's one of the toughest parts for people who are first getting started.
Yeah, I think it was really challenging at first. And I think it got easier and easier as I saw progress being made through real estate. So as I got some deals done and like saw money coming in, and then it made it a little simpler. But at first, it's just waking up at 5 a.m. so I could get work done before I go to my actual job, going to my regular job, and then after that, coming back home and working, putting the kids to bed and working a little bit more. And then just taking weekends, like taking advantage of Saturdays and Sundays when I was not having to work my full-time job and using that opportunity to really push. And I think a big part of that too is getting your family to understand the sacrifice that they are making as well, because it's not just you. It's when I'm not there at home, my wife's picking up my slack. So it's trying to involve everybody in the situation and getting help when needed was super helpful.
I mean, that was super insightful and it really helped me understand. But like, if I could sum it up into one word, it was grind.
Yeah, I mean, you're working before work and you're working after work, but like we've talked about before, like that pain of like the transition is super temporary. And if you're able to just push for like a certain length of time, then it makes it easier in the downline. And so it's something that like if you really want to make a transition, it's not going to be easy while you're making the transition. And a lot of people, including myself, don't have the luxury of stopping work full time to jump into a new thing because their situation in life doesn't allow them to go months and months and months without income or without the same type of income.
Like what you said there, I just want to like re-say the first thing you said is the pain of the transition is temporary. So when I first started in real estate, I did something similar, most people have. And that was something I used to always tell myself, like, hey, the pain you're experiencing now is temporary. And in order for you to get through this, you need to push harder. And if it were easy, everybody would do it.
Absolutely.
Were there any pivotal moments or signs that made you feel confident it was time to make this jump?
I mean, like the first actual like real estate transaction coming in was like super helpful. Like that felt good. I think like one of the reasons I love the investment partner program is because you're getting some steady income during waiting for those larger transactions to come in. So for me, like I just said, like here's a financial goal I need to hit to feel comfortable making a transition. And it wasn't just like meeting my current income, it was exceeding it to a certain extent. And so, like, just seeing like the first check, second check come in, feeling a lot more confident when I'm having conversations with clients, things like that. There wasn't just like one moment, but it was kind of like that multiple moments stacking together to get me to a point where I was like, okay, I can do this. And even if there is like a couple months where I'm a little slower, I've built up the confidence in myself that I could like close enough transactions to weather that storm of some slow months if they come.
Yeah, it's funny how winning breeds winning, right?
Totally.
Would you be willing to share what happened to you also in June at that Hatch conference, the conversation you had that day? And I think,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think like we had a like a small mastermind group and where we all kind of asked, like we had an ask, which was like, here's something I'm dealing with, and what would people like recommend how you deal with it? And that was kind of my thing. Like I want to make a full-time jump, but I have a family to feed. I have like a salary that pays me enough to live comfortably. And how do I make a decision when to do that? Because I like there was fear surrounding that. It's not just me. Like if I fail, not only do I not eat, which I can handle for a little bit, but my kids don't eat. And so, like, one of the biggest insights that I got from that was like using that fear to be the reason that you get up and push. And like, it was actually a disservice to yourself and your family to not be taking a chance on yourself. And so that like was really like super motivating. It really fired me up and it gave me a little more confidence where like instead of like standing on this line of doing it enough to like make some extra money and keeping that full-time job, being comfortable with getting rid of comfortability, taking a risk on myself because it would change the trajectory of my family and kind of help me give them like a better life than I could if I stayed in a similar position.
So the very thing that was holding you back was also the thing that should propel you forward. Isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of shifting the way you see it and turning it into instead of like, oh, I'm afraid that I can't do this, it's this is why I have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So cool. And Hormozy talks about like, if you're feeling a certain way that's negative, think about what the opposite would be and to do that. And so he said he uses the word anxiety, used the word fear, but I think they're, very, very close siblings to one another. And the best way to battle that is action, right? So the best way to battle your fear was action. And you knew if you're not busy, that's going to make you less panicked, right? Because things are going to start happening for you. So cool. If you guys have any more questions for Sawyer, specifically about transitioning from another job to real estate full-time commission position, please drop those in the chat. I'm going to transition now to a little bit more of tactical type questions and get into the money a little bit, which I know you guys are also excited to hear about. But if you have anything specific you also want to hear about from that transition, please do drop in the chat because I'd love for Sawyer to share more of that with you guys. Let's talk a little bit more about the net income because you are a first year real estate agent. You passed boot camp in middle of August. So you did those remainder 4 years of 4 months in 2023. And then January 1st through December 31st is going to be your first full year in real estate. And you're going to have made a $200K net income only from the real estate side of things. And that was while you're maintaining another job, right? So like the sky's the limit for you next year. What specific strategies or actions contributed most to that 200K success in your first full year?
So as far as like strategies and action, I think goal planning was super important to like have like an actual plan and try to work it. The 135 sessions we did as a team, like in January of like earlier this year, were super helpful for me to set these goals. This is what I need to feel comfortable making a transition, and then just like follow up with leads, taking on leads, and even if they were kind of dead leads, like treating everybody like they're my next big client until they show me otherwise. So like I was going on every Zillow call I could, like all the PM lead, like doing everything I could, and so I think like that was helpful. And even if those people weren't the ones that close transactions, it kind of shows the universe that you're ready for those opportunities to come in. I heard this quote, I think it's like Les Brown, and it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than have an opportunity and not be prepared. And so just trying to focus on like when these opportunities come up, like I'm ready to jump on them and really swing for the fences. So just like putting in the effort, making sure it's a daily thing, and trying to prepare myself for when the opportunities come, which the team really, you guys prepare us, but I just show up to the trainings,
Yeah, that's true. So I love that quote that you just shared. I'm going to ask you for it again afterward. That is so spot on. And I feel that way as well. I also love that you talked about treating everyone like they're your next big client. Cause I hear so often from other agents, they always have a reason why they believe something's not going to work out. Right. And so, and by putting that in your mind, you're creating that situation before it even happens, right? You're already discounting that person. You're already knocking them out. And so you're manifesting them not working out. And so I love that you're doing the flip is like, hey, no matter what, everyone's my next biggest client. And until they prove that they're not. And because a lot of times things change for people, things change really quick, right? Like life happens really fast. Or people just sometimes hold their cards close to their chest. And so something they told you wasn't necessarily a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. It just didn't tell the whole picture, right? And so buyers aren't liars. They just don't trust you yet. But I love that you started off with the goal planning part of it. On a more tactical side of things, can you share with us that ChatGPT thing that you just told me about yesterday with your goal planning?
Yeah, so I took the 135 that we do as a team and put it in the ChatGPT and just said, like, show me what a day in the life looks like for me achieving these goals. And I could share it with you, but it spit out like from 5:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night, a schedule of what I should be doing at each time. What are the primary focuses of things not to forget about? And it includes, because for me, one of my big goals is maximizing work-life balance. So I have time with my family. So it was all that, and then included things that I didn't even put in my goals. I didn't put exercise in there, but I added 30 minutes of exercise so I can maintain like energy, eating healthy, like all these things that I didn't even include in there. So that was like pretty cool. And I think you and I both geek out a little bit on ChatGPT, but that was a really like, I'm going to follow that schedule.
I love it, man. And we both geek out on ChatGPT, but like if you're not incorporating AI into your daily habits, as of now, you're falling behind. And so you like I have ChatGPT up on my browser at all times, my app open at all times, and I'm incorporating into everything I do. And I hear from you a lot of the same. So that's just like a side note for everybody. Something else that you just said that too that I want to point out is you talked about when I asked you how it was possible, how you made this transition, the word I summed it up with was grind. You talked about 5 a.m. after work, working the weekends. But then now your goals already for the next 12 months, like this was only a 9 to 12 month span we were talking about, that was your struggle. And now your next goal is already maximize work-life balance. And you talked about earlier, the pain of transition is temporary. So like, how incredible is that, guys? Like, that's not a lot of time for that pain, right? That is a very short amount of time. He's already on the other side of that tunnel, figuring out how now he can maximize work-life balance. That's pretty freaking cool, man. That's pretty cool. So on that goal planning as well, you touched on this earlier and you said you wanted your family to understand the sacrifice as well. And something that I've personally got to learn from you, which has helped me immensely too, is the importance of involving your spouse in your goal planning. So can you kind of share that mindset that you have and a little bit of insight to your partnership with your wife, Rochelle?
Yeah, so I think it's super important to include your spouse. And like I kind of said earlier, like if you're going to be making a transition and you're going to be working extra and you have, even if you're just like a boyfriend or girlfriend, but especially if you have a spouse and children at home, someone's picking up the slack that you're leaving off when you're working extra. And so there's a lot of frustration that can build up if you're not communicating and appreciating and things like that. But I think like sharing your goals, my wife and I plan each year and pretty regularly, like here's our goals for the year individually, as a couple, like how are we going to get there, and then here's the steps that I need to take, and then here's the type of help that I need from you to be able to make those steps. I think it's been super instrumental for us to be able to have those open conversations. And then when there are times of frustration, like, hey, I'm working a little later than I planned on, or I'd have to like skip a Saturday or two because I've got showings or open houses, it's like take it back to the goals. Like, remember, these are the goals we have, and this is the sacrifices that we need to make. And it's not always like super well received in the moment, but I think it does kind of like tail off any type of arguments. And it's really helpful in having a partner and sharing kind of the vision that we have for our family and having somebody that can help me out when I need help. Because it takes multiple people to have a family, you know?
Yeah. And like you referenced a partner, right? So often when we create these goals, create these visions, and this is what I used to do, was I would just do it by myself in my own mind, and I would write it all down, but I wouldn't share it. And so then it was my goals, not my spouse's. And so Sawyer actually taught me this about a year and a half ago when he was in boot camp. He talked to me a little bit about it. And it was like a light bulb went on. And I did this past year for 2024, I did my goal planning with my wife. It was a complete different story because it was also her vision. It was also her goals, right? And it's so important. It doesn't matter, like you said, it doesn't matter if it's a spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, parents, kids, anybody. If you have family, if you have anybody who relies on you for quality time, it's important to involve them in those things. And so like, thank you for teaching me that before. And for everybody on the call, I highly recommend for your 2025 plans, involve those that you're closest with those plans, because they will help you get there. And there will be zero resentment because your guys' goals and vision will be in alignment. So cool.
I think one last thing to add to that, there's also the accountability factor. So like if you tell them like, hey, I want to do these things and you're not doing it, a good partner will say, hey, you're not doing what you said you wanted to do. And like, I want to see you succeed in your goals. And so that's the other aspect that I think is super important. Even if it's a friend, you know, whoever it is, but it should be someone who you trust enough and who trusts you enough to be completely honest and let you know when you're failing to meet the goals that you set for yourself.
That's a great add. And accountability is such a huge thing, is to have that extra person where even if they're not even saying anything, just being afraid that that's what they're thinking, right? You're like, oh man, she sees me in bed right now. She's going to think I'm so lazy.
Yeah, totally.
That's amazing, man. I love the way you, Rochelle, really work together. It's amazing. And she's such an amazing woman, such a great partner. So that's very cool. So Joey asked this question in the chat, and it kind of is good. Little next question is, so how have you approached specifically lead generation? Joey asked specifically about cold calling. And then how is that affecting your lead gen? Like what percentage of that is your lead generation? Where is your other lead generation activities? And how have you been building your client base?
So I love cold calling. I think it's kind of fun. And I also I think it's great. I prefer to call furbos. Those are my favorite to call. I do a little bit of like Google PPC, and now I've got a farm that I'm working and starting to call them. But first, like furbos, because it's an owner with a property who likely, and like I'm selective on who I call. I don't just call like the whole list. I'll look at, okay, is this a single family home? Because likely they're not making like a lot of money on the property, and it's probably a good opportunity for them to sell. And then through some of these like investor like meetups I've done, and like sometimes just get texts from investors, I have multiple people in my database who are looking to buy homes. And so if you can, just simply talk to somebody and, are you interested in selling a home possibly, then you could make that connection. I try to cold prospect about 5 hours a week. Every week's different. But honestly, I focus way more on the connection. So sometimes I'll make 5 calls and have one that lasts half an hour. And sometimes I'll make 50 calls and just leave a bunch of voicemails. So it's different, but I think it's more, part of my goal for next year is to have 10 conversations a day. And that's going to be like through prospecting. I'm going to send out some mailers. So there's going to be a lot of different ways I try to get there, but just 10 valid conversations a day, about real estate and about real estate opportunities is kind of my goal for next year. Cause I think, like you say this, the conversion's in the conversation. So the more people we can talk to, the more likely is that we're going to be transacting. And so I think it's super important. And cold prospecting is a great way to do it.
No, I wish I could claim that one, but that's a Sharonism right there. But I'd love for that to be mine.
Well, I heard it from you. So, you can claim it from me.
I love that metric, 10 conversations a day. I'm going to revisit that in a second. I had a question though because you said I'm focused mostly about conversations, which is what you said, connections is the word you used. I'm focused mostly on connections. Some days I'll leave all voicemails. Someday I'll talk to one person for 30 minutes, right? So I remember at that mastermind we went to, we both heard Ben Kinney talk, and he talked, and you've even mentioned this earlier in just this meeting today, as creating wins, right? So if you're only focused on connections, how are you making sure that you're qualifying that time that you leave just all voicemails? How are you still making sure that counts as a win for you?
I mean, for me, I leave voicemails on specific properties. Okay. So it's not like I'm gonna leave 50 voicemails. It's like I might leave 15 and they're on properties that I know is an area that I have an investor that's interested. Yeah. So like some of those things, and I get a lot of calls back on voicemails. So it's not like I don't see it as wasted time. And I've been playing around with different types of like voicemails I could leave to try to generate interest. So for me, it's just like, okay, 15 voicemails on 15 properties that I might have someone who would be a buyer. If I get one call back on that, then it's a valid conversation. So more of just like making sure that it's the right type of properties that would generate opportunities for people that I work with.
That's fair. That's great. And then, so going back now to the 10 conversations. So I often say that the two biggest levers in your business are going to be conversations and appointments. You can have more conversations and more appointments. Everything else will take care of itself, whether you're new or experienced. If you're experienced, maybe it just takes less conversations, less appointments, but no matter what, if you do more, it's going to fix everything else. So 10 conversations, do you have kind of an idea of how many 10 conversations how many appointments that should lead to?
Not yet. I mean, my goal is probably so that's 50 to 60 conversations a week, depending on if I'm going Saturdays. I actually think Saturdays are great days to call. But we could talk about that later. But I'm hoping that out of 10 conversations, I get one appointment.
I know you're great at tracking your metrics, so I'm really excited to hear from you in a couple months, like what you see those results being, because I think that'll be really telling.
Yeah, and then I can gauge, okay, do I need to ratchet this up to have the appointments that I want, or can I dial it back, however?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Like how can you be more effective with your time? And then if your biggest goal is maximizing work-life balance, that factors in there. So talking more a little bit about finding and developing relationships with homeowners and landlords. You talked about calling FRBO. Beyond that, like what's been your main strategies for doing that?
I mean, a lot of it has been inbound leads in the past. So before we had so many agents in the San Jose market, I was one of the first. And so got a lot of inbound leads. And with those leads, like really try to form good relationships, even with the people who don't initially sign up. And I've had quite like a few people like reach back out to me later, either whether it's just questions or to like sign up for actual management. So I think like forming those relationships is positioning yourself as a resource. Like for me, it's helpful that I have a background in general construction because that's one thing I really utilize with clients is helping them throughout decisions with their home. And so I find that as a way to really, then they're not just reaching out to me for real estate questions. I'm helping them find contractors for different things. So like that's part of it. And then just like caring about their property, like letting them know, like, I think our company is really good at being aligned with property owners as far as charging percentages and different things. So like letting them know that like you're invested in their success as a property owner. Like I'm not shy about the fact that I benefit from their success as well. But I think that like people trust you. They just trust the fact that like you're here, you care for them, you're trying to help them with their property, however it is, selling it or managing it. But like even like my latest escrow was someone I met 6, 7 months ago who didn't sign up and like reached back out and was able to really help him with like a sticky situation. And so I think just fostering that relationship and staying in touch and just showing that you care and because we do care, like we care about our clients, we want them to succeed. It helps us succeed. And if we don't help our clients succeed, then we're not going to last in this business.
So cool. So that was where I was hoping you would go with that because I have noticed, and I haven't said anything to you, but I kind of already knew what was going on, is you haven't really been taking leads the last like 3 months. And so what you've done is, yes, you had yes, you were fortunate to be one of the first people in the market in the program, and that allowed you to get a big database quickly. But now you're just working that database, and it's obvious that you've been doing it the whole time because you're starting to see now fruits of that labor. And I think what you said is so simple but so profound is just caring, right? Just being invested in their success is taking you so far, and not losing touch with those people, is so evident because now you're succeeding even more, but yet not having that new shiny object to distract you. So, new leads aren't always the best leads, right?
And I do think that was one of my challenges in the beginning is I would not. I mean, Kevin told me a long time ago, it's better to go deeper than go wider. And so like I was so focused on taking every lead I could get instead of like really helping the leads that I had. And so that's been a huge strategy shift, like over the last few months is focusing just more on helping my existing clients, and it's leading to more transactions and better business.
Yeah, because we get compensated not when we get the lead, but when we help somebody achieve their goals.
Yeah.
And so you have to go deep in order to be able to do that. So really awesome that in like such a short amount of time, you've been able to figure that out. And there's still a season for taking a lot of leads, right? There's the season for everything, but I love that right now you're in the season of nurture and working the existing database because I do believe that's where the true fortune is at. Can you share an example of a successful deal that you've worked on as an investment partner?
Yeah, I'd say so. One of like the first big successes I had with IP client was helping a client Mohammed with a 1031 exchange. So just helping him, he already had an agent to sell his existing house. And actually the reason he got in touch with us was they had a tenant in there they wanted to vacate so they could sell it and the tenant wouldn't leave. And so I offered, like after talking with you and Brett, like I offered to help vacate the tenant with the caveat that he would sign a buyer's rep with me and let me help him buy his next property. And so luckily the tenant was really cool, got out pretty quickly. There was like no issues with that. And then like the real like benefit was he initially wanted to buy two single family homes. And so I just started talking with him like, what do you think about multifamily? And showing him some opportunities and how he could grow his money, like going back to like helping your clients succeed, and just showed him like this is what it's going to look like if you buy two single family homes. And this is your appreciation, this is the money you're going to make, this is what like a multifamily looks like. We ended up and we looked for like 4 or 5 weeks pretty heavily. We were touring properties every weekend. I was sending them financials every day, and finally found a place in Santa Cruz that has 5 units. It's a single family home in front, fourplex in the back. It's making like 140 grand per year right now. And he's currently in the process of trying to turn the single family home into a duplex. So there's some value add there too. But he went from making 3 grand a month to like right around 12 grand per month. And he only had to pay an extra 300 grand for that property. It was really eye opening for me that these opportunities are out there for people. Because he didn't sell like a multiple properties or a huge property or a luxury home. It was just a regular home in Union City that he sold for 1.4, and then we got him something at 1.7. So I think those opportunities are out there for a lot of people, and they just haven't been presented with that, like the opportunity to do it, and they don't have someone who's like able to walk them through that process. But I think that was definitely a success. I formed a really good relationship with that client, and I know that we'll all be his trusted real estate professional like for quite some time.
No doubt about that. I mean, if you have a win like that for somebody, they are coming back to you for all of their business ideas and then for all of their friends' business ideas too. So very, very huge relationship to create there. How are you now leveraging that success story specifically into more success?
So I use that conversation in Furbo calls. So like when I'm selecting properties, I'm going to call, it's like selecting single family homes in areas that I know have like decent, like in the Bay Area, a lot of single family homes are between 1 and 1.5 million. And in San Jose, you could buy a fourplex for 1.5 million. Like there's probably 15 right now. And so it's just like, for me, like knowing the numbers and then being able to have that conversation over the phone. And then I was kind of talking with you about this today, but I'm going to do a webinar next month on 1031 exchanges. I'm going to invite my whole database of investors, a lot of people that have single family homes that are currently rented, or maybe they didn't sign up for management, send it out to them if they don't show up, and then just use it as a way to kind of market the fact that, hey, this is something I can help you with. And a lot of people don't realize that a fourplex is about the same price as their single family home, and they can make 2 to 3 times the amount of money.
Yep. That's exactly it. And I've like even personally recently on the FRBO calls I've made in front of the team recently, the team has heard me tell your story over and over because I don't have to be the one who helped him. I can use Sawyer's story to tell other people about how it works. And a lot of people are in that like kind of range, right? Of like they're renting their single family home that grandma used to live in for around 3,200 to 4,000, and it's worth around that 1.4 million range. Like that's a very, very common story here in the Bay Area and Southern California as well. And just tell that, hey, we went from renting it for 3,200 to now getting him a gross income of 115K. A lot of people are like, how'd you do that? Right? Like it has that, and it has proof over promise, because you're not promising, hey, I could do this. It's, hey, I just did this for somebody else. So
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. And I love how you're now leveraging this. You're going to do the webinar. It's such a great idea. Really, really smart stuff. Daniel asked a question in the chat that I want to bring up next. You have gone all in on having a virtual assistant. So can you tell us a little bit more about that experience, how you came to hire that person and what they're doing for you and what it's meant for your business?
Yeah, so I found her through a company called Wing Virtual Assistants. I worked with her there for a few months, and then she ended up leaving them, and then I just hired her on the side, which is great because it saves me a little money. I've been working with her for over a year, and when I was making the transition, it was super helpful because there's a lot of like admin stuff that takes time, but doesn't really, Jeff Bezos like always talks about like do what makes your beer taste better. Right. So admin stuff doesn't make my beer taste better. It's not making me like it needs to be done, and it's helpful, but it's also not like me being in front of people, having conversations and meeting in person is how I'm going to succeed. So having a virtual assistant who could do all my admin stuff has been really helpful. And when I first met her, she was just a general assistant, and then just trained her a lot, like the trainings we have, gave her loom trainings and stuff. And she has turned into a really excellent assistant. Like this morning, she just compiled a list of like property appreciation in multifamilies throughout Santa Clara for a client of mine. It took her a couple of hours, and so she's really helpful. I pay like $700 a month for her to work full time, which is really good money where she's at, and pretty inexpensive for me. And that was something, like, I had the luxury of being able to afford that when I was trying to transition. But also, like, for me, I was like, okay, one property management deal could pay for my virtual assistant for 40 hours. And if having her for 40 hours, that's 40 hours a week,
60 hours. Yeah.
160 hours. Yeah. If
Yeah.
having her for that 160 hours could help me get one deal, it pays itself off.
Yep.
And then being able to leverage that time and spend time with my family instead of like staying up. Because at first it was like, okay, at night I'm going to work on my Sierra, and I'm going to try to, like, just like the summaries from each client on a Zillow call. She listens to Zillow calls and input summaries. So a lot of things that are really helpful to have and need to happen. But if I was doing it all, I wouldn't be able to spend as much time doing the things that I think really increase the bottom line.
So cool. I love that you embrace that. I've been using virtual assistants since I read that book, 4 Hour Work Week. And I was, making my transition at the time, working in a restaurant. And I hired one. It was like for all the same reasons you just mentioned. It's like, if I just do one more deal, it all pays for itself, and I don't have to spend time doing all these tasks that are like really just repetitive tasks.
Competitive, but important. And if she could do it 80% as good as I can, then it's worth the money.
Yeah, and you have to have that realistic viewpoint. Now, how many weeks did you spend in training your VA? And I think that's one of the most important things is, like, you don't just hire somebody and they show up and know how to do everything, right? Like, you got to train them properly. So what that training look like?
It was really gradual. So like, it'd be like, okay, here's what I want you to do at first. Here's a couple of videos on how to do it. Let me check on your work, and then we'll kind of go from there. And then as I've added more things to her plate, then like this morning, I sent her a video on how to calculate property appreciation, and she sent me a spreadsheet this afternoon. And so it's pretty, like, she's a really quick learner, but if you create a Loom video and show someone how to do something and they have like good intelligence, then they should figure it out. So it's been, I keep training her to do more things, but she was able to do some stuff like right away.
That's amazing. Thanks for the insight on the virtual assistants. Like, I'm a big believer in it, and I love that how much you've embraced it. So looking back now, what do you wish you could tell yourself 18 months ago?
I think like one thing when I first was trying to get into real estate is I believed I could do it, but maybe not like as much as I should have believed, And so I think like going a little more full force at first, because to me, like that first 6 months was kind of a waste. Like I learned a lot. I didn't really I closed some PM deals and stuff, but I feel like I could have done a lot better because I wasn't actually putting in the time that I needed to achieve the goals that I said I had. One of the moments that was pivotal for me was when we were doing our 135s in January, was like thinking about like, here's all the goals that I say I have right now. And like, are my actions really reflective of those goals or not? And that's one question. I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss. Like you just mentioned his book, but the podcast, he has these questions he asks himself. And one of them is, if like an outside observer was viewing my actions, what would they think my priorities were? And so like, I think I was thinking about that question. I was like, I don't think that they would think that my priorities were making a full-time transition to real estate. And so that was kind of like a moment for me to really reflect on like how I could change my actions to actually show what my goals are and to achieve those goals. And so that was a really kind of helpful moment for me.
One of my favorite parts about this whole webinar right there is that if an outside observer were to see my actions, would they say they support my goals? So I challenge everybody who's on the call today, anybody who watches the recording, to do the same thing for your 2025 goals and think about what you've done over 2024, and ask yourself, if somebody else saw what I've done during 2024, would they think that what I've set out to want to do in 2025, will I be able to achieve it? And so for you, from like a more tactical standpoint, Sawyer, What actions do you think those involved in order to hit those goals, or to make that like change from what you said, like the first 6 months you were kind of wandering to then being fully in?
Dedicating more time, starting to like getting up at 5 to work on stuff instead of getting up at 5 to kind of hang around and sip my coffee, like really starting work right away, working like after hours, working Saturdays and Sundays, like really just putting in the time. I think like we're provided opportunity and skill set through the team. We get leads, we get training. And for me, what was missing was effort. And so, like, that was just sometimes it's tough to be real with yourself and be like, hey, you're not putting in the effort that you could. And so that was really just the biggest change. And then, other than that, was like amping up the cold prospecting, following up better with leads. Like, I'm not great at following up with people at all. People in my family, friends, my best friends, we talk like once or twice a year. And so that's something that I need to actively work on because it does not come naturally to me. So those types of things were kind of like, okay, these are big things that I can do that I have to force myself to do because they didn't come naturally.
Yep. That's awesome. So it sounds like the word that all came back to, you used a different word, but I'm going to substitute a more PC one as action. You said work, but I'm going to substitute action, right? Like it comes down to action.
Yeah.
Because I think if we say work, we might be like, oh, that sounds hard. But if we say action, then that's something to get excited about, right? And I do agree strongly with that. Irma asks, what the hell are you doing at 5 a.m.?
So like I have 3 kids at home. So like if I want to get anything done in the first couple hours of the day, I need to wake up before everyone in the house wakes up. So like I start my day like little gratitude journal, I read one or two things, and then it's like, okay, let me set up because my virtual assistant's in India. So like we talk first thing in the morning. When I wake up, I've got messages from her. So here's the task we want to do today. Here's like answering some questions. So start with that. And then it's going over my tasks that I set for myself the day before. Here's a few main things that I need to focus on today, and just starting anything that I can do that doesn't involve calling someone at 5 a.m. I basically do. A lot of days it's bothering Kyle at like 6. Like we text at like 5:30, 6 a.m. like pretty frequently. But yeah, so it's those types of things like the on the computer stuff, and then a little bit of like personal stuff because we got to take care of ourselves to be able to take care of others. So that's when I get in like half hour to an hour of like taking care of me time. And then, 6 a.m. on is when I work until the kids wake up.
That's awesome. And you mentioned it. I'm a 5 a.m. person too. Sharon has a club called the 5 a.m. Club where he does a phone call every single day for the last, like, I don't know, 15 years, where it's a phone call he does to like pump you up in the morning at 5 a.m. It's all about just like waking up early and getting busy right away. You always want to attack the hardest things in your day in the morning. That's why like working out in the morning is ideal, because you want to do something challenging, something hard. For me, it's a lot different now, and because of what my focuses are. But I think like what you said is like, definitely don't make calls, right? Also, pro tip is don't tell your clients you wake up at 5, because some of them do, and then you're going to start getting phone calls at 5 a.m. from them. And those are going to be more like service calls. They're going to be more service type calls where it's not that you don't want to get those, but you want those to be towards the tail end of your day, not the first thing you work on is the service stuff. And so I think setting yourself up at 5 a.m. for your lead generation is the most important thing. And so what that looks like probably is like knowing who you're going to call that day, figuring out who you're going to call, figuring out what you're going to say to them. And so a lot of that's like looking on the MLS, looking for those deals and things like that. And so if you're very, very prepared going into the day with those things, Sawyer also mentioned he sets up his VA for success. So he does a lot of leadership in the morning too. So if you do a lot of leadership, set other people up on tasks, then it's time during this day that he doesn't have to spend on those things, right? Like he might have to spend 2 or 3 hours doing a cash flow analysis that afternoon, but instead he spent that time, that 1 or 2 hours training somebody else how to do it. And now all of a sudden he got that time back infinitely for the future. So those type of things, Irma, but great question.
One other thing I'd say, Irma, is for me, like after 8 a.m., my phone starts ringing. And this was especially true when I was working full time. So getting some of that deep work done before the day kind of gets taken away from me is really important. And it helps me feel like grounded, but also it's just after 8 a.m., it's easy to get distracted with things and people getting in contact with you. So I think it's, for me, doing it early in the morning works really well.
Yep, I agree. If you guys could drop some love for Sawyer in the chat, some gratitude, some great things. He's shared so many amazing things with us today. I just want to all, just express our gratitude from us all. Like Kim said it earlier, just everything's so inspiring. This is truly inspiring. Thanks. Like exactly how I feel as well. I've wrote down a ton of notes. I always learn a lot every time I have these like longer, deep conversations with you, Sawyer. Kind of last question before we let everybody go today is, I know that everybody's very inspired with everything you've said. You're an extremely inspiring person. Your hard work, your dedication, you're a family man, and it's just all super, super impressive. So how can people get a little bit more Sawyer in their life to continue to grow with you?
I'm pretty available on my phone or text. So, I mean, I might regret this, but I could drop my cell in the chat. Like people, I'm always like open to answering questions, trying to get better at social media. So I'm going to start doing like monthly webinars and trying to like use some of that content for Instagram and stuff. But really, like if you have questions or if you want to pick my brain or like want to even like I'm always looking for people to work with. And one thing I love about this team is that it's a group of like-minded individuals who are focused on progress. And in my life prior to this has been hard to find people that I think have similar mindsets. So I really enjoy that. So like I'm always looking for more people to talk to who are trying to grow and become better versions of themselves. So yeah, just like text me or call me. I'll put my number in the chat right now.
Love it, man. Sawyer also leads the Tuesday 9 a.m. Role play lead generation call every single week with C2. So you will also get value from him there as well. And Ben Kinney drops his phone number in every single webinar he does as well, and he's a billionaire. So maybe you're onto something there, Sawyer. Well, hey, amazing job today. You absolutely crushed it. I know we all learned a ton. Thank you so much for coming to share with us. We're all super impressed with you and just excited to see what the future holds for you, because you've done already so much in so little time with so many obstacles, so many restrictions, and you've been able to break free from a lot of those restrictions. And so, I mean, it's crazy. Just the sky's the limit. And so excited. And yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I really appreciate the team because like all the success that has happened wouldn't be possible without getting connected with you guys, the trainings, the opportunities. And so like for me, like I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I've had just to work with the team and to grow with the team. And it's amazing. When I joined, there was 12 people. And now we've got like a huge team, and it's really cool to see like the type of people that are being brought together. So I'm really appreciative as well.
No, you're the best.
I haven't had a drink yet.
Thanks for everybody for attending today, and awesome stuff, Sawyer. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.